Our story begins 2,000 years ago with the master craftsman and brilliant engineer Daedalus of Athens. Now, Daedalus of Athens had a brilliant mind but an egotistical heart, and while his inventions were made to benefit mankind, ultimately they served only his ego. Daedalus's hubris caused him to continually push the boundaries with his many ostentatious inventions, one of which eventually claimed the life of his only son. Now, while on Crete, Daedalus worked and lived for many years under the service of the tyrant king, King Minos. Now, unfortunately, King Minos had incurred the wrath of Poseidon, and his wife had been cursed as a result, forcing her to fall in love with a bull. Now, King Minos' wife came to Daedalus delirious with lust and pleading him to help her seduce the bull. Now this time, Daedalus pushed that envelope too far. He built a hollow wooden cow for the queen, and she successfully seduced the bull, producing the abomination half-human, half-bull Minotaur. Now, King Minos was horrified, and this creature quickly became too savage and too big to contain or fulfill. And Daedalus was ordered to construct his most elaborate and ambitious project ever, which was a labyrinth that would exist underneath the palace of the king. It was a never-ending and inescapable maze, and it was so complex and brilliant that the chief architect himself only barely escaped with his life. But the King Minos was a wily king, and he tricked Daedalus. So when Daedalus emerged from this labyrinth, he was imprisoned along with his teenage son Icarus in the highest tower in Crete, so they could never tell anyone about what had happened to them. And so while their bodies wasted away, the ingenious inventor's mind didn't, and he constantly faced his environment, studying and trying to figure a way to escape. And eventually it came to him. So Daedalus and his son collected the feathers of as many birds as they could, and eventually they built 2 sets of wings so they could escape. But Daedalus held a grave warning for his son. He said, "O Icarus, do not fly too low, or the sea spray will dampen your wings and make you heavy. And do not fly too high, or the sun's rays will melt the wax of your wings." So anyway, on the day of their triumph, the two leapt off the parapets of their tower. And oh, how they soared, they cruised through the air, and there was amazing onlooking from the gathering of people below. People were amazed and excited. This had never been seen before. And Daedalus began growing anxious, and as he watched Icarus laugh with glee and soar through the air higher and higher, pumping his arms higher still. And now Daedalus watched with horror as Icarus, soon eclipsed by the sun, his wings turned to ash and he plummeted into the seas below. Now Daedalus named the seas the Icarian Seas and a nearby island Icaria. But he could do nothing for his son and continued his flight onwards. And when he finally landed, he built a shrine to Apollo and he laid down his wings for good. And that was his final flight. This timeless classic, though etched over 2,000 years ago, is still completely relevant to our modern society, and its lessons should still be reflected upon today. The main point of this story is to be wary of hubris, or excess of pride, which is a common trait amongst many of our adolescent-aged schoolchildren we will be teaching later in life. Unfortunately, we will all meet our own Icarus in our classroom, and will feel as helpless as Daedalus himself, if we are unaware of the signs. Is it so surprising that teenagers 2,000 years ago thought of themselves as invincible as they do today? This story serves as an eternal reminder of the recklessness of our youth and the dangers of the indulgence of pride. Additionally, this tale is a metaphor of life and moderation, a popular ancient Greek philosophy of the time. The wings represent life and freedom, which Daedalus is gifting his son, while the sun and the water represent both hubris and complacency, which are excesses known as vices. What makes this story unique is that the lesson was learnt on perhaps the least likely offender, Daedalus was responsible because of his egotism and pride for many of his inventions, and though they were spectacular, they were often devastating for others. Also, Daedalus was ultimately responsible for the imprisonment of his son and the tools of his demise. But who is truly accountable, and who should have suffered the consequences? Is it the man that pulls the trigger, or the gun that kills its victim? Icarus, you're a tragedy. But in the words of Oscar Wilde, never regret thy fall, O Icarus of the fearless flight. For the greatest tragedy of them all is not to feel the burning light.